for our budgets. Once again, because they have so much faith in us, we are the first batch to be reporting out. On February 3rd, we'll have 3 budgets, followed by 3 on the 8th. Oh, I'm sorry, 4 on the 8th, 3 on the 10th, 4 on the 15th, 3 on the 17th. As you remember, when we work a budget or we hear a budget one day, we work it a day or 2 later. So February is going to be busy. I'm hoping that you all got COVID out of the way, so you're not going to have to deal with that stuff while we're dealing with this in February. The good news is that by about March 8th, we should be wrapped up as far as our reporting is concerned. So we've got 1 month. Stay healthy, stay focused, stay sober. It's going to be a good time chewing through all 27 of our budgets. And I'll get copies of this made up when you get an opportunity for the committee. And other than that, I think we can go straight to our agenda. Today, we have 2 items on the agenda. Oh, first off, are there any bill introductions? We're supposed to ask it 3 times. Are there any bill introductions? No, I know I don't have to do that. All right, seeing none, we will not introduce any bills. Today, we have an update on the unemployment insurance modernization, and we'll also have a briefing on the performance measures that research analyst, is that your title? Research analyst Deere has worked all year on, as far as I understand. So not this year, I mean last year, because this year that's just really not very much time. But I think that's going to be very interesting as well. Now, with regards to the modernization, we have Secretary Amber Schultz. So, oh, very good. Nice to see you in person. It's a new year. Excellent. All right. In that case, I will just welcome to committee, Secretary Amber Schultz.
Is it on? Now it's on. All right. I'll start over. Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair, Ranking Member. I'm Secretary Schultz, Kansas Department of Labor, and I have here with me today our Chief Information Technology Officer, Kelly Johnson, and we're going to be giving you an update on our unemployment insurance modernization efforts. So please feel free. It's a very brief presentation, so any questions you might have, just feel free during the presentation. So next slide, please. Next slide. So I thought it was important to give a little bit of background. We haven't been in front of any, obviously, representatives since last April. So just a reminder of kind of where we got to the place where we are today. So in 2002, so 20 years ago, we were fortunate enough to receive some federal READ funds to start our modernization process. And at the time, Governor Sebelius and the legislature authorized some bonds for us to go ahead and rewrite not only the unemployment insurance system, but the taxing system that's very related to it. And then in 2007, we actually got some additional READ Act funds. And then in 2011, the modernization efforts were abruptly halted. And so literally walked out overnight and nothing had happened until 2009, when then Secretary of Labor Garcia was directed by Governor Kelly to start the modernization efforts up again. And so we did do that. And as we all know, in 2020, there's that little pandemic. And so all of our efforts and resources were halted for the modernization, but instead we're focused on paying claimants. And so once our volumes got to a good spot, we did restart the modernization process again. So if you're going to go to the next slide. So in late 2020, we created our specialized team. Focused on the efforts of the 2019, which was visiting other states, other like state-of-the-art UI systems. And then in 2021, we published our RFP on April 1st. And so that RFP closed in the summertime. What we did then was we evaluated of the 4 proposals that we received. Our subject matter experts scored all of them. We shortlisted 2. We were given presentations by those 2, and we have a project negotiation committee that is currently working with the selected vendor, but that, as you know, is a very closed process. So we can't speak too much about it, but that is where we are today. Additionally, I wanted to let you know that as part of House Bill 2196 that was passed in the last session, that created an unemployment modernization council. And so we worked very closely with that group to make sure that all the needs of the stakeholders, so the legislature, the agency, and of course, the claimants that we serve, we're going to get the best system for what they were looking for. And so the Modernization Council provided a report to the LCC. The LCC received that report, and as part of HB 2196, the LCC had to communicate to us that they received the report, and doing so would release the funds and authorize us to sign a contract. And we'd received that letter on January 7th of this year. Yep. So next slide. So this just goes into a little bit more detail. I'm sure you've heard that projects of this magnitude have to go through the Department of Administration keto process. So it's basically an 11-step process where, as I mentioned before, finalizing the contracting on step 8. So, which is completing the RFP process. And then a couple more steps. Obviously, we're going to push as fast as we can to get through the steps 9, 10, and 11. But we're anticipating it'll be probably early summer before the work actually starts, because there's a discovery phase and making sure that the project plan gets through the D of A process appropriately. And with that, I promised you a very brief. Yes.
Very good.
So I would be happy to see him for any questions. And again, I brought our CETO if you have any in-depth questions about the keto process.
Okay, well, as a budget committee, I'll get to you in just a sec. As a budget committee, the one thing that sticks, that it ranks high in my book is 2196 issued some funding. Even at the time, I didn't think that was going to be comprehensive. Where are we standing as far as the funding levels necessary for the modernization project?
Thank you. That's a great question. So just so you know, as part of the keto process, before we can even consider developing an RFP, we have to go through a feasibility study. And that gives an estimation of what they believe the one-time cost and then the annual incurring cost would be. And so that estimation for the implementation, the one-time cost, is between 40 and $50 million.
Okay.
And just like any other IT projects, the ongoing annual maintenance is anywhere from 10 to 20% of that. And so just to keep that in mind, and 2196 did allocate 9.6 million for us, and that certainly will not cover that cost. However, we have identified about $43 million available just for the leftovers from the READ Act funds and some federal grants that we have. So we feel like we're in a pretty good place right now to be able to get what we need from our vendor.
Maybe the first person that's ever told me.
Well, I mean, we'll take more money if you'd like to give it to us.
All right, Representative Varnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions. So the first one is the READ Act funds. What is it? Could you explain a little bit more? I see that in 2002 and then in 2007 is when we received it. Is it only every couple years? Can we apply for this all the time?
I will have to get back with you and give you a better explanation, Representative, on exactly when the READ Act funds are available. I do know that they're federal dollars allocated, and I don't know if what the criteria specifically are, but I will get back to you.
Okay. The next question I have is just the process of the RFP. So it says on here, it was put out on April 1st, 2021. Do you have to let it sit and get so many proposals for such a certain amount of time? Have you already selected somebody? Is the process already starting?
Sure. So thank you, Representative. So to answer the first part of your question, it depends on the RFP. We did select to have ours out for several weeks because we know that's a big lift for any potential vendors. And then not only that, if we wanted to have any sort of correspondence with them, so we do that, they do that through DOA. Any specific questions about the specifications in the RFP. And then we did have 4 vendors submit, which is about, in this space, there's probably about 7 that do this for every state. Um, and then we had selected 2 to be on our short list. And then our PNC has selected or recommended 1. And so we're working with them to see if we can get a contract underway.
Okay, and then the final question I have is, are with the modernization process and what you guys sent out, is it just a computer system, or are we looking at upgrading the phone lines? Is that all part of it? So forth.
Thank you, Representative. That's a great question. So my philosophy is that I don't like the word modernizing. It needs to be a cultural change. To give you an analogy, this is though we bought a car in 1970, because our mainframe is from 1970, and we've done no maintenance to it. We haven't changed the brake pads. We haven't done an oil change. We might have, fixed a few dents here and there, but essentially we have not invested in this asset at all. And so as we go through this journey, I really want to set the expectation and cadence that we're not done. Every year, we're going to be maintaining the system, seeing, what else we can do to continue modernizing and keeping up with the times. But to specifically answer your question, it's an overhaul of pretty much all of our system within the agency. So the mainframe runs everything. So we pay out unemployment benefits, but we also have a taxing unit who determines the taxes on the employers. Our legal departments involved, finance, uh, obviously our IT, and then we have some, obviously regulatory and compliance that we need to adhere to. It's not going to upgrade the phone lines, but it's going to be more accessible to our users. So it's going to be responsive on a tablet or a phone. And it's also going to have an interface where they can do self-service. So hopefully they're not going to have to call in. They can do everything right there within their portal.
So, I'm sorry to follow up. Speaking on that, so I know a lot of, like, for instance, when I got married, I thought that my marriage license I got sent back was my official one. It wasn't. I had to go to ican.com or something like that and use the app. So is there talks of an app with unemployment? Can you already utilize an app?
You cannot utilize a standalone app right now. You can go in a browser and access the portal that way. Because I don't know much about the vendor because it's secret. I'm not sure if it's going to be, a responsive web page or a standalone app,
Okay.
but it will be accessible.
I just think an app would be kind of a neat idea since we're all on our phones anyways. And I have renewed my car registration on the app and it's easy. So just putting my 2 cents in.
I would love to see you talk about integrating an app into a mainframe.
Kelly, would you like to answer that? I know you're teasing.
All right, Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, it's good to see you. Question, I know that there's several steps left. Perfect world with everything falling into place. When does this thing start up?
Thank you, Representative. This is a very large information technology, and so best case scenario, 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years I just want to clarify, until this is operational.
Yeah, until it's 100, unhooked the old one and we're fully operational on the other one. Of course, in between, there's going to be things that go online and we'll be testing and making sure that things are going appropriately. But yeah, it's going to be 3 to 5 years before the new system is completely 100% deployed.
you, Mr. Chair.
That's a big ship to steer, though. Yes, Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, a couple questions. I just want to make sure. So as far as our constituents who file for unemployment, that basically the portal and the whole process that they're facing now, they will still face that for another 2 or 3 years. Is that correct? I mean, it'll be
Commissioner,
basically.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
it is correct.
And if I can, I know you guys have been, I'll sort of salute you, your person, Julie Mangini or something. Is he?
So Julie's
Oh,
right here with us
okay,
today.
okay, there she's back there. That, because I know you've been sending out kind of monthly updates and I have very few people who still have any sort of real issues that, we used to, a year ago, we were getting contacted by everybody. I mean, it was a big fiasco. But as far as the metrics, I mean, it seems like the metrics look as far as, calls being completed and all that. I mean, is it really, I mean, it seems pretty back to maybe a 2019 normal. Is that where we are as far as response and people being able to get their unemployment like they should?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. Yeah, we are definitely approaching a more normal. We still have a long ways to go. There's still a lot of fraud backlog, wage investigations that we're having to do. And then with the new program, the PUA for the gig workers, that is also a program that we're still going to probably see several more months of work before we are completely done with that. But as far as call volume, I think in April 2021, we were getting 150,000 unique calls a day, and now we're in the 5,000s. So it's much more manageable. We're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, but for sure.
If you don't mind me asking, just another, maybe relevant or just inquiring minds want to know, what's the fraud situation now here in 2022? I mean, is that still an issue or what's going on with fraud?
So I'll just, if you'll give me, Chair. So typically pre-pandemic, the type of fraud that we saw were wage fraud. So somebody might have a part-time job and not reporting that on their unemployment claim. And so we would be investigating that for earnings that they are not claiming. We also saw a lot of people making fake businesses and having, employees that they didn't really have. So those were the kind of fraud that we saw. But what the federal programs did was really show that there was a lot of money available in these unemployment programs. And so the identity fraud just blew up across the country. And so for a long time, for probably the April, well, most of 2021, we were combating ID fraud. For the most part, that's been mitigated. A lot of that was due to, thanks to 2196, where we allowed claimants to go to a law enforcement agency, provide their identification documents, and that law enforcement agency would send it to us and we could clear them and clear their payments. So now we're kind of back to that old cadence. We're kind of starting to see, as we clear their ID fraud, now we're seeing that there's wage fraud or some other kind of imposter fraud. The PUA program, again, the gig program, also was a source of a lot of fraud because in the beginning, the U.S. Department of Labor forbid us for asking for any sort of earnings justification. And so you could put, I didn't make anything, and you could be a self-employed person who is making a considerable amount of money. And Chairman, if I could just follow up on one thing with Representative Amix. When I said 3 to 5 years, that really is that's not like from today. That is from the beginning of kind of that discovery phase of 2020-ish on. So make that point clear.
Thank you,
Representative
Mr.
Amix.
Chair. Secretary, thank you, because I'm sitting there thinking, why? People going to question this process a little bit. I appreciate you clearing that.
Yes.
Very good. And for the record, my dogs are excellent employees. All right, any further questions? Yes.
Okay.
Wagner.
Now, if I can follow up.
My dogs are not actually employed by me.
It's recorded. So the 3 to 5 years was from last year when you started bidding out?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah,
okay.
from the discovery phase working on our specifications for the RFP until the system has rolled out. Is an average. The states, we work with the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, and they have a very close pulse on what all the states are doing. So there's about 24 that are modernized, and the other half are either in some sort of active procurement or planning for it. And that's the ones that have been modernized, that's 3 to 5 years.
If it, just to put you a little more specific, so if we started back in 2021, you're talking like early 2024, maybe sometime in 2024?
Ultimately, yeah,
It's not going to happen in 2023 or 2022.
likely not. 2023, I don't know. It depends on the vendor. Maybe 2024.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you for being here and in person. It's such an improvement over the last
Yes.
couple of years.
Very much. Thank you all for having us. Right, bye.
All right, next up, we have a rookie to this committee. We have legislative researcher Dylan Deere, who's going to go over the performance measures that has been his baby for quite some time now. Welcome, committee.
For the record, my name is Dylan Deere. I'm a managing fiscal analyst with the Legislative Research Department, and I am also the coordinator for performance-based budgeting for the Legislative Research Department. There was a special request that came from House Appropriations to update the various performance measures which are submitted as part of the budgets. So that was specifically a House request, although that information has also been provided to the Senate as well. So in response to that, you have these green books before you. This is just the performance measures for agencies that appear before general government budget. So you may very well be, if you sit on any other budget committees, you're going to have another green book, as Representative Amex mentioned earlier, and they will have different agencies in them. The entire document's about 700, 900 pages, and it's on our website underneath the Publications tab, if you want to see it as a PDF. The documents are broken down all the way down to the subprogram level in many cases. And so there should be a separate page inside of each agency for each different program, often each different subprogram that you're going to see. So opening these up, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's in them, and we can talk about the Kansas State Fair. So for the Kansas State Fair, you have a couple of, let me see, we have 1, 2, 3 programs. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3 programs, yeah. And so you can see at the top that this is the administration program. Each one of the items on this page are items that are required by the statute that requires performance-based budgeting. So the goal here was to bring the agencies into full compliance with that statute. The first item is consequences of not funding. So basically, if you were not to fund this program, what would the result of that be? The second, if you look in this side of these rows, these are mostly sort of radio boxes with a little bit of text area that you can fill out. Where it says specific, okay, what it's talking about there is the specific, whether or not the authorizing statute is specific to this particular program, or whether it's just the general authorizing statute of the agency. In other words, there shall be a state fair. It's saying that, no, this actually is specific to this particular program. And then it goes into statutory basis. It provides you a little bit of details about the statute that creates the state fair, where that authority comes from. Then it'll talk about mandatory versus discretionary. In some cases, you'll have programs that are, like in the scope of an agency, but are not specifically required by statute. Okay, in those cases, those will be considered to be discretionary programs. You don't see a lot of discretionary programs. You'll see some in KDOT. You'll see some in commerce. Programs that are sort of within the scope or the gambit, as it were, of the agency, but not specifically directed by statute. Next, you have an MOE match requirement. Okay, that's going to simply be a yes/no button. That means that are there federal funds here? And if they do have federal funds, whether or not there's a maintenance of effort or some sort of match that's implicated by these. And that just gives you a heads up that if you start making adjustments, you want to think about the federal funds impact at the same time. The next item will be priority level. And so there is a requirement to establish a priority level. What you're going to see over and over again is priority level 1. Okay. And the reason you're going to see that is because they're statutorily required. And in the opinion of the agencies, if you're statutorily required, you can't put anything other than a priority level 1 around that because they don't have any choice about whether or not they're going to do it or not. Moving on to program goals, okay? They're going to be lettered A, B, C, okay? And these are the program goals which are drawn from the DA 400s often, and then and in some cases, they sort of expanded on those further to establish those. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about program goals when we get down a little bit further. And then there's going to be a brief box in here that's going to give you some program history. So there's like the history of that program. Then getting down to the performance measures box, we're going to have 2 sets of boxes, one for outcome measures, one for output measures. Just to remind the committee, outcome measures are measures that are related to what the agency's trying to measure, what the agency is trying to achieve. Okay. Output measures are simply measures of activity of some way, shape, or form. Then you're going to have a goal column. Okay. So you see the A's, the B's, the C's that are in there. If you look at the program goals above, those are drawn from there. So you say, if your goal is to increase attendance at the fair, that's related to program goal A, and program A is support the mission of the state fair. Okay. For agencies like the state fair, you don't get a lot of variation, but the more regulatory agencies that are going to appear before this committee, Board of Optometry, Dental Board, they'll often have a regulatory function, they'll have a licensing function, and they'll have an enforcement function, and you'll see goals that are tied to each one of those different functions that they're going to have. And then you're going to have 19, 20, and 21 data for whether or not and those are all actuals. Then you're going to have a 3-year average. Okay, so that just takes those previous year numbers and averages them together. And then you're going to have projections for 22 and projections for 23. Okay, so, and if you have an enhancement request of some sort, that the agency is requesting, theoretically, it should have an impact on those targets for 22 and 23 and how those tie back to the program goals. At the bottom is funding for that specific.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time? I think that's something that everyone should write down. That was a key point right there.
Okay. So on FY22 and FY23, those are goals, okay, for that particular agency or have been elucidated by the governor. And so whenever you have enhancement requests, it's valuable to see how those enhancement requests are related to those target goals. In other words, are you going to increase attendance at the state fair by doing some enhancement that's being requested? That'd be just one example. Now, this budget book was submitted back in September before the enhancements were submitted, but this data is largely replicated inside of our budget analysis. Okay, and you'll be able to see those adjustments inside of there. So this is a much bigger document. We can't get all these measures in our budget book, but the majority of the key measures are replicated inside of our budget analysis. At the bottom, you'll see some funding. That's some historical funding levels. It's basically broken down by state general fund, non-SGF, and federal funds. We included federal funds so that once again, you know whether federal funds are implicated, but also because obviously federal funds are playing a big role in budgets the last couple of years. And then you're going to see the same data for every one of the programs. So you're going to see this as administration, you're going to see this for capital improvements, and you're going to see this for facilities. And you're going to get a separate page, sometimes 2, for each one of the various programs, that make up the agencies. Like I said, this information is pretty much directly in compliance with the statute authorizing performance-based budgeting. That was what the goal was. We worked with agencies quite a bit, so they put a lot of work into submitting these. But the next stage of this process is for legislative committees like this one to provide feedback to agencies to indicate whether or not that performance measure is actually useful to you when you're thinking about it as part of a budget process. You're going to see a lot of measures in here maybe you won't find useful. And it's perfectly legitimate to tell an agency at that point, it's like, hey, I see you're measuring this. This does not help me make a decision about whether or not, $4.3 million is the right number to spend for your agency or not. And so it's that feedback loop, okay, that will really allow these performance measures to improve over time to make sure, because agencies measure lots of stuff. Okay, they measure their activity all the time. They do that internally. Okay, but the goal for these measures is to come up with a list of measures that helps you make decisions about whether or not an agency is achieving its goals or not that you have set for it. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Looks like we might have a batch of them. Representative Amix threw his hand sign up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just got to say one thing, under the performance-based budgeting process and this booklet, once I figured it out and realized that the goals and the outcome and output measures are tied to what those goals are, and they're done it by letters, it's easy read. It is an easy read. The only problem that I have is that we got a header, and I've got to find what budget I am by, the bottom. So anyway. That's my only complaint.
That's why I use the electronic version, because I'd never be able to find my way through all this paper.
I think that's where I'm going next. Nice notebooks now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Varnberger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just make sure I understand the process. This is just performance-based measure. These are just the measures, not the actual budget. So we'll get another booklet of the budgets, or are we gonna get them printed off and distributed each time? Each committee meeting?
My plan is to have them printed off. I know I'm personally trying to move to electronic, but I'm not going to force that on anyone else. We'll have them available as PDF and also have physical copies here.
I didn't know if we are gonna get a book like this, or can I request that?
We can have books.
Okay, I'm gonna make your life
Phyllis gave me
horrible.
permission.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the plan is to have books.
Okay,
That's the last plan I heard, is that there will be books just for
Okay.
the particular agencies, and they'll be, once again, be specific to these, to
okay.
each budget committee.
And then the next,
In the beginning, you might get individual, like, printouts, and that's just because,
they're not ready yet.
yeah, they're not ready yet.
That's fine.
All
No,
right.
that's fine. And then the next question I have is, remember, I don't know if they still had them last year or not, the one pagers that we used to get, is that what this is now?
Okay, so I wasn't talking about this today, but I will talk about it a little bit. The one-pagers have gone away.
Okay.
Okay, however, our budget analysis has been substantially reworked this year. And Stephen Wu, who's in our office, and also you'll often regularly see, he's our Department Administration Analyst. You'll see him in here all the time, really led that effort. And the new budget analysis has a one-pager built into it. Okay, so there'll be a 2022 overview and a 2023 overview. And we sort of moved away in the budget analysis from the focus on record class expenditures, where we talk so much about contractual services and capital outlay and commodities, okay, and moved towards a policy focus. So what you're going to get is the current amount of approved budget, each one of the different policy changes that have changed inside of that budget, and the new request. And then you'll see the governor's recommendation and each one of the different policy changes that produce that governor's recommendation. And so that'll replace the one pager as the goal. It's also much more graphically driven in the same way that the one pager was, with tables and pictures. It'll be in color. The new budget analysis will be in color. But if you want, you can get Stephen to come in and brief that thing to you, and he'll talk your ear off about it.
That's fine. I just was trying to understand that, make sure that I'm all on the same page on the process. So, thank you.
In color is absolutely not necessary.
When you have, well, I understand.
Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a little bit of background. The performance-based measures, this goes back how many years in budget history? Like 10 years ago, or when did they start doing it?
About 4 years ago is when the original bill was passed, okay, and that was converted into KSA 75-3718B. And that's actually the statute that codifies that bill.
Okay. So now if I can ask, so I'm looking, like I'm here in the Department of Agriculture. Let me just maybe be on their first page. And they have these program goals. So those are the performance measures. Okay. And these goals are something that they internally generated. Am I correct? That
Correct.
the agency comes up with their own performance measures?
All of this, just to be 100% clear, all of this stuff is internally generated by the agencies. This is not really a work product of KLRD. The only thing we did was provide feedback on how to go, how do you determine measures? What are other agencies doing? So, but at the end of the day, each one of the goals, each one of the measures is selected by the agency, not by us.
Okay. Um, okay, no, that's helpful. So there's not, in one sense, it's still a fairly soft performance measurement because it's not really external. It's sort of internally generated, and I don't really see that they ding themselves like, oh crap, we're doing a bad job in this area. They just have the numbers and there's just numbers. Am I correct in that? That's our job to ding them. Okay. Thank you.
It's not an audited document in the sense that you're talking about now.
Further questions? Oh, and by the way, back to that colored comment, line graphs. I don't want any colored line graphs, all right? Those screw me up something fierce.
Wait until you see the program analysis. I think they're all line graphs.
Oh,
inside the budget
lovely.
analysis. I
Lovely.
think JG would agree with you about your position. on
Exactly.
that.
Was it his idea? Jerk.
It was not.
All right, I'll just have someone sit beside me and point out the lines. All right. Any further questions for Dylan? This is way too easy. We need to really chew on him a little bit. Got something? Okay.
Like I said, the key to this process and the only thing like I would really encourage this committee is to provide feedback to agencies. I mean, if you see a measure in there, particularly Representative Wagner, that you think you'd like to see something different, just tell the agency what you want to see. I mean, it's that feedback loop, okay, that allows performance budgeting to work and will eventually allow us to get to a point where the performance measures can really be used to evaluate agency performance.
Well, and we saw some of that last year in conversation with the various agencies. We were looking at some of the performance measures, and some of them made perfect sense. Some of them were a little bit odd, like how many times did you answer the phone? It was a number of phone calls received was one of the performance measures. That doesn't tell me much. If things are booming, they might get a whole bunch of phone calls, or if there are a lot of problems, there might be a whole bunch of phone calls. It doesn't tell me how the program's working in any way, shape, or form. So that's the sort of thing that I think Dylan's talking about, to look at these measurements and make sure they're measuring what you think should be measured. It's a valid question, and something that I think, yeah, I can go on and on about that one, not in the performance-based arena, just in budgets in general. Numbers don't lie, that's true, but they don't always measure what you think they're measuring, so you got to dig into it a little bit, and I think this is a great crutch to set us on that way. So, Dylan, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. If you have any questions or anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out.
All right, that's all we had on the agenda. Anything else for the good of the order? Yes, Representative Anderson.
Yes. Hey, I just wanted to ask if we'll be able to get the budgets prior to the hearing date.
I certainly hope so.
Okay,
I
fantastic.
can't promise that.
Okay, yeah. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
My plan is yes, but that kind of depends on it getting here, so never mind. Dylan knows the answer.
So the budget hearings will probably start the 31st. You're not going to get a lot on those early hearings. You're probably not going to have a lot of additional time. Okay. But then we'll get the budget books published. They'll be on our website. They'll be in here and you can read to your heart's content. So you have plenty of notice on those. It's just, the timeframes are very, very tight between when we receive the governor's recommendation and we get the publication. So that first week, after that first week, things should be good.
Excellent. Representative Wagner.
I know you sent out the schedule for next week, which was kind of bare. I mean, so it's really the week after January 31st is when we're really going to start having.
We really don't have a whole lot to do until we get the budgets.
Okay.
And then it's bar the door.
Yeah, got it.
Anything else? All right then, until tomorrow at the same bat time and same bat station, we are adjourned.